welcome back to the show. Today, Jason Bohn joins us once again. He's the CEO and Clinical Director of Adolescence at the Invalidating Center at Rumination Counseling Center. He's here in the Kansas City metropolitan area, and we want to welcome him back to the show. How are you?
Oh, it's a long month, and I'm dealing with the same frozen pipes and school closings that everyone else is dealing with.
Yeah, it's snowing here in New York right now. What's the weather like with you in Kansas exactly?
We are hoping to get to 20 degrees, and the salt on the roads will actually work starting today. We had rolling power outages, and yeah, my name's Jason Bohn, and I've worked in some capacity with adolescents or their families for 30 plus years, from youth ministry all the way up to the national government level, working on child welfare programs to impact kids' lives. And so I've kind of brought it all together at this point, running an intensive outpatient program for adolescents that are struggling with anxiety and depression. And we do it in an intensive outpatient format. So 4 days a week, if school's not canceled, 3 hours a day, and really work on helping the young person, move forward in a lot of different areas, gain some coping skills, and deal with what we're going to talk about today. Most of them have an invalidating advisor. Well, I will just dive in. I've talked about this advisor concept, or at least mentioned it a couple of times during some shows, and just want to dig a little bit deeper into this concept, because it's an inner voice in all of us. We all have this inner voice, and it's both amazingly useful and devastatingly damaging when we aren't able to unhook from it. And young people just don't, literally biologically don't have the development to unhook from it on their own all the time. Almost everything, the advisor concept, and most of what I'm going to talk about today is from the book The Thriving Adolescent by Louise Hayes and Joseph Sayarachi. And they note, the advisor is an incredible skill that helps us navigate the world of it really more efficiently. Jill, I suspect you have a cell phone. Am I correct?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Did you build your own phone? No? Well, there may be a singular person in the world that could build a cell phone, but I'm really doubtful that they could build the network that it's on all by themselves too. And the advisor is that ability we as humans have to convey information and really learn by standing on the shoulders of others much greater than us. And so that's how we can get to a 10th generation, iPhone, is they keep building on what they had. And you have to build on it, you have to be able to pass that information on efficiently, instead of every single person having to learn by trial and error every single thing that goes into that. Does that make sense? Yeah, and so in contrast to the advisor, a lot of, we have this discoverer, it's another term in this, but the discoverer is a concept that helps us find new ways to interact with the world through trial and error, just like a baby learning how to walk. But the advisor is about avoiding trial and error. It involves judging, evaluating, generating rules, listening to our self-talk, and problem solving. And so the advisor can become a problem if we just use it blindly. We can lose contact with the physical world because we're just listening to the rules in our own head. It leads to worry, rumination, just kind of keep coming back to those same negative thoughts. And our own self-talk or rules, even if they don't help us, live, we just keep listening to them. So right now I'd like you to do, with just that little bit of information on the advisor, would you do an experiment with me? And I'm hoping those, or anybody that is listening, will also just do this themselves. In this experiment, I'm going to say a few sentences. After you hear each sentence, simply think about what I've said and notice what your advisor, your inner voice, says about it. Your job is to just notice what your advisor does. There's no right or wrong here. Just notice what shows up when you listen to what I say. It might be best to close your eyes so you can concentrate. Are you ready? I am weird. Remember, just notice what your advisor says. I am brilliant. I am perfect. I am broken. I am stupid. I am ugly. I am beautiful. So what did your advisor do with that information, Jill? Well, yeah, no, and that's it. That's exactly what it is. Most of us, apply anything we hear to ourselves. And you clearly did. Now, here's the and I would say I do this we do this with every rotation of young people. So every 5 weeks I do this, and every single young person and parent says the same thing you do, that some of them they apply to themselves, or some of them say all of them apply to themselves, some of them not all of them, or they argued with them. But here's the most interesting aspect of this experiment. Do you remember my instructions? I asked you to listen to some sentences I was going to say, and your job was to notice what your advisor did with them. I never once mentioned that they were about you. In fact, they were about me. I was saying, I am weird, not you. Isn't that interesting? We're just sitting here, and I say some sentences and ask you to notice what happens, and your advisor goes into overdrive, and all this stuff shows up. So I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of a clue about what the advisor does. It formulates verbal conclusions about the present based on what it's been taught or what has worked in past circumstances. So, for example, a young person who was physically abused at home may assume that they're going to face the same risk of abuse at school. We might say that the advisor forms the rule, people are dangerous. I think my own young person who has trauma and has dealt with some physical abuse. Can you
get started? Just if you're tuning in, guys, don't be alarmed. Jason Bohn still here joining us, anxietycenterkc.com. So you were talking about childhood trauma, someone that was abused when they were younger.
Yeah, and so if you have the abuse when you're younger, you form rules in your head about the world around you. And so that advisor for a young person in trauma might form the rule, people are dangerous. Consequently, they may act guarded, withdrawn, and fearful, both at home, where it's adaptive, and also at school, where it's usually less adaptive, but people think they're just standoffish. I would say my young person who has had trauma that we adopted definitely has some rules about they are responsible for their own survival. So what they want to do is what they want to do, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the consequences are or what we're trying to teach them. When in advisor space, people avoid engaging in trial and error. They just don't want to take the risks it takes to try something and then fail. So they behave in ways that are historically allowed them to gain rewards or escape things that they didn't like. They rely on past learnings. I would say in an adolescent, this might look like, you tell a young person to do their chores or their homework, and they get that is not a positive experience for them. And so they have learned that if they throw a fit when they were younger, they learned that throwing a fit sometimes got them what they wanted, or running to their room and slamming to their door, or making a big enough deal about it that their parents wouldn't end up making them do or follow through and make them do the homework or the chore. And so they've learned, and it's been reinforced, that this behavior that has nothing to do per se with the homework, but it's in their head that they may not do well at that, is now controlling their behavior. So we talk about it and we teach about the advisor. We use the metaphor of the advisor as like a GPS in a car. All right. When it works, it seeks to guide us quickly to where we want to go. Saves you time, preventing you from going in the wrong direction and, taking wrong turns. I once typed in a meeting that I was supposed to go to in it, and this is a community level meeting that I knew would be in somebody's agency's office. And I ended up on the north side of Kansas City in front of an apartment building. I'm like, this meeting is not here. So at that point, I couldn't trust my GPS in that. And if I just sat there or tried to walk in, I would just continue to get, negative consequences from listening to that advisor. The advisor really influences our cognitive regulation, and that includes emotion control, our mindset, whether we're a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, self-criticism, mind reading, which is, me trying to determine what you think about me, and responsibility. So a lot of young people don't want to take responsibility when their advisor is really challenging. Young people that have skilled cognitive regulations or good advisors, they have the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms around them. They reliably meet commitments and fulfill obligations of challenging roles. They have the ability to plan, strategize, and implement complex tasks, along with the realistic evaluation of consequences of their actions. On the other hand, young people unskilled at cognitive regulation look like, black and white thinking, extreme polarized thinking, poor perspective taking, poor conflict resolution, invalidation of themselves regularly, and difficulty effectively influencing their own or others' behavior. So they aren't good at controlling their own behavior, and then they're not able to build an argument or a discussion or influence other people to move towards what they would like to see. You put it all together, we have, this advisor, if it gets so negative, can end up creating this filter that the young person sees the world through. And so I'll share a story. We had a young lady coming into our program, or interviewing or doing an intake to come into our program, and she was with her dad and clearly enjoyed her dad and got along with them, and because I look for those kind of things. And this young lady was cute, 8th grader, bubbly, all kinds of stuff, wearing kind of a cute outfit, and she had a hat on. As we're going through the intake, it's becoming really clear to me that no matter what's said, her advisor is beating herself up with it, that she's just got this self-abusive advisor. And so at one point, I very, very carefully asked her, I said, what thoughts would come to mind if I asked you about your hat? And up to this point, this young lady had been looking me in the eye, sharing her concerns, knowing and being able to list how her anxiety and depression were impacting her life. And as soon as I asked her about the hat, she immediately put her head down and, try that whole hunched over position. She's like, oh, it's a stupid hat. I don't know why I wore it. I'm so embarrassed. And her dad's like, yeah, she can't take a compliment at all. And so you can start seeing what this advisor is. It starts building this filter, and you ruminate on negative thoughts about yourself. So it's one of those things that can, if a young person's advisor becomes too negative, it can turn a young person who appears to have everything, have it all on the outside. And parents feel this, like you're taken care of, you've got good stuff, you can do whatever you want. But that young person also, clearly hates themselves or loathes themselves and really wants to end the pain. This is when that advisor gets too negative, you see a lot of suicidal ideation and attempts. I try to explain this to family because it is really hard to understand. But a young person who's born, especially with emotion dysregulation, and so they're feeling strong emotions, it's kind of like a biological filter that they're born with. And so they're out in the world, and this is really young kids, and somebody doesn't talk to them or rejects them. And so in the playground, this happens all the time. Nobody can get picked first every time. And parallel play means, if you look at it, means they're not playing with you. So it's really easy. I just want to make it clear that we have all faced this kind of this rejection in society, that we're just mind reading kind of the rejection. But that rejection becomes discouragement. And that discouragement ends up becoming this thought of, I don't fit in. I didn't fit in. They didn't want to play with me, so I didn't fit in there. That thought gets picked up by your advisor voice, this inner voice. I don't fit in, becomes something must be wrong with me. That gets picked up again by the advisor voice and becomes something is wrong with me. I differentiate something must be wrong with me from something is wrong with me, because a young person who is in that something must be wrong with me phase will still be going, boy, if I got the right jeans, if I went to PacSun and bought jeans there, or if I got the right, shoes, if I had the, this year's Michael Jordans, maybe I'd fit in better. Or they're the young person that's asking, hey, can I go to a different school because this school is beating me up? So they still believe that there's somewhere that they can fit in. But eventually the filter that they've already got kind of convinces them that they don't fit in multiple places, and they generalize that to mean something is wrong with me. And so that term, that something is wrong with me, just gets repeated over and over years, and turns into an internal thinking of, I am a bad person. If I'm a bad person, then I can't be loved or cared for. If I can't be loved, I'm not worthy, and I have no value. I may as well end everyone's pain by not being alive. I want to check in with you and see if that progression makes sense, because I share this with a lot of young people, and not a one of them has denied that this is the direction that their thoughts have gone in, especially if they're working with us.
Absolutely. Let me ask you,
Sure.
Listening to you speak, you have a lot of, obviously, education and experience in this field, and I just think it's important for you to remind everyone, if you don't mind, a little bit of your background. We're not taking the commercial break today, so we have some extra time to talk here. Give us a little bit into who you are, and where did you develop this knowledge so much, with our minds, in a sense, and, children and adults, and just, you have a lot of experience in your belt. Would you mind just sharing that with us?
Yeah, so that's a great. I started working with young, people younger than me, kids. Like, this was an inner drive. So when I was, 8, I was playing with babies and 4-year-olds, and by the time I'm 14, I was asking and helping to run the nursery at my churches. By the time I'm, 19 and 20, I'm running or helping to run after school programs, and ended up in youth ministry. And youth ministry is this interesting thing that churches have where most of the time young people aren't forced to go to the youth ministry. So it's a voluntary thing where you're helping young people really process and develop spiritual values of some kind. But again, they're not regularly forced to be there. So you have to put a lot of energy into just influencing them. And so, there's a theory out there from Malcolm, I'm going to lose his last name, but that, 10,000 hours of something can make you an expert. And I've literally spent more than 10,000 of hours with teens and their families in some fashion, whether those were week-long trips or every week that I had interactions or doing therapy or focus groups. And so all of that work just kind of led me to wanting to get a degree where I could officially work with families that were struggling. And so I have my master's in clinical psychology. I have a license in Kansas to practice and work with families and young people. And I just kind of put all that information together to develop this program. And I used experts. Again, Louise Hayes and ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy, is a model that is out there. And Louise Hayes took it and turned it into DNAV, which is kind of the core framework. And then I use DBT, which is developed by Marsha Linehan and has years and years of research in these situations. I think the gift I bring to it with my families is that I can talk about it in language that's not quite as academic and makes sense to them, and I can help them find pathways out of that and out of those situations. And so many parents tell me they're walking on eggshells at home, and that's why I term all of this stuff I do with parents as bold parenting. It's both the process I think parents and young people should go through, but it's also, you have to be bold to help your young person navigate the world these days.
Absolutely. And on your website, I just want to point out anxietycenterkc.com. You can actually watch some videos and also written testimonials about the work you do and the programs you offer, because you talk to a lot of people for sure. So it's positive to see that. And I want our listeners to know to make sure they check that out as well. You even offer anxiety tips on there for those of us that may need. And this year, more than any year, I was assuming the anxiety and the panic and has been up since the pandemic started. Are you noticing that with adolescents more? Are they more affected, or the adults that you work with?
Interestingly enough, more and more early on in the COVID thing, more and more adults were impacted. Young people kind of, especially those dealing with anxiety, were like, okay, so I get to be at home instead of having to go to this school that feels scary and risky to me every day. And locally, they literally had their grades paused when school ended. So none of them had those stressors on them. So life stressors got to them. But as it went on, and by midsummer, then we started seeing how it was impacting young people and how they already had this tendency to avoidance that we've talked about, and isolation that just got exasperated, and they started avoiding their family. And then when school kind of kicked in, or whatever that looked like for them, and expectations went up again, their anxiety skyrocketed. We've kind of been at a full house for quite a while with the waiting list at the moment, because young people are struggling here, getting and successfully navigating school.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, really. We appreciate your advice, and we still have about 4 minutes left in the show today. So what else did you want to talk about in regards to anything that's beneficial to our listeners, of course?
Yeah, so going through this advisor concept, if a young person and they're diagnosed with anxiety or depression or ADHD, it's obvious that they have to deal with their symptoms. That makes sense that they need to control that. And it's also one of those places where medication kind of kick in. But I would argue that with this advisor concept and the way we just as humans use language, that they also have to, and all of us have to, deal with what we think about ourselves. And it impacts every area of our life. I know that on days I'm not feeling as good about myself, or I have had some bad experiences, it is much harder for me to go give a presentation or lead a discussion or do this kind of talking, just because I'm having to deal with what I think about myself that day. And so if your young person is struggling, you need to help them deal both with the symptoms, and that is, we teach square breathing and other coping skills to deal with immediate symptoms, but they also have to deal with this whole, I don't fit in, I'm not good enough, I don't like my body, and this advisor thought that just keeps rotating through their head. We recommend that they move towards, we all have it. You even admitted to having it when you heard some of those things. You need to, pause. The bold process is, breathe deeply and slow down. Observe those thoughts and feelings. So step outside, unhook from that advisor, recognize what you're thinking and feeling, even the critical ones. Decide. So listen to those values. Is this true about me? Am I ugly all the time? Am I weird all the time? Listen to those values and decide who you want to be, and then decide to act and create new rules for yourself. And quickly example, in high school, I played basketball, and I did not think I was a good shot. So the rule in my own head was, I am not a good shot. I was still a starter because I was a great defensive player and I was on the court all the time. And my coaches just kept wanting me to shoot. And I'm like, I'm not going to shoot. I'm the worst shot on the team. I'm just taking away from the whole team. Well, it turns out I was actually taking away from the team because I didn't need to be as guarded as heavily, because of this rule in my own head. Was influencing my behaviors and my action. And I think that's happening in a lot of young people's lives, just in making friends, interacting with their parents, and doing their schoolwork.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we are just about out of time here. So what else would you like to leave with the listeners before we get your contact information?
I would just lead, if you're dealing with any of this, or you feel as a parent you're walking on eggshells with your young person, to go visit www.boldparenting.online, and I'm sharing all the information we've talked about here on the show and access to a lot of other information that I share with our families. I think you should just get yourself educated and figure out if you need help to change the cycle that you and your family and your young person is in. And if so, just be willing to do that. It's not a crutch. We aren't all, I don't do work on my own car. I am not an expert in my automobile, and I take it to somebody to get it helped. And so this isn't your training or your forte. None of us were handed a book about how to raise our children, especially our teens. And so I just say, go seek out some help if you're struggling, and let somebody else speak into your guys' lives and help you change those patterns.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Could you give us your website or phone number?
Yeah, I still recommend everybody go www.boldparenting.online. I am Jason at anxietycenterkc.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. You have a great day, and everyone else, please continue to listen to the show. More, of course, coming on the way.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.